What does it mean to be a conservative business owner? Now I'm going to say something a little bit controversial here. I'm actually getting really tired of some of the people that are probably legitimate conservatives within the business space or the entrepreneurial space, essentially telling me that I have to buy their product or their service, not because it's good, but because they're conservative. They're trading on my patriotism. They're trading on my values without actually providing a quality good or service. Well, we've got a special guest today that started a business in 2018, and he has conservative values. He has Christian values, but he's also provided a superior product. And we're going to discuss today about what it takes to not only be a good business owner, to be competitive in a market and an economy which is increasingly rebelling against the very values that we hold as being sacred. All of that and more coming up on this episode of Making the Argument.
To our members in Volley, I hope that you enjoy this conversation. And if you aren't a member of our community chat, I hope you'll go to the link in this description, join, introduce yourself, and we look forward to hearing from you there.
All right, a little bit different roundup today. As always, I'm your host, Nick Freitas, member of the Virginia House of Delegates. But other than that, a reasonably okay guy. We have with me, as always, my beautiful bride, Tina, Queen of the Bees.
Hello, everyone.
Our producer, video editor extraordinaire, the guy that makes us all look good, Hamilton, the good Hamilton, the one that doesn't like central banking.
Thank you, Nick.
And our special guest from Good Ranchers, Ben Spell. How are you doing, Ben?
Hey, man, doing well. Thanks for having me.
Oh no, it's our pleasure. It's great to have you on. I got to give a little bit of backdrop here. So we got some Good Ranchers, and again, like I said, there's a lot of people out there saying, "Oh, I'm a conservative business. Do business with me because I'm a conservative." Right. And I obviously, some of the other people that we follow within this space do a lot of advertising with Good Ranchers. You guys do a lot of advertising with them, and you've supported those guys, which is much appreciated. But when I first had the package of meat show up to our house here, I was a little skeptical because I'm a little picky when it comes to like red meat. Like it better be good. Yeah. My wife is an excellent cook. We've got a big green egg, and we know how to cook the steaks. And here I'm sitting in this box of there was fillets in there. There was some ribeyes. There was some New York strip. There was some chicken, and I'm like, all right, we'll see. Now we could have spaced that out over time, but being the red meat eating masculine manly men that we are, we're like, no. We're going to do a side-by-side taste test of all of this. And so we threw it on there. And Ben, I really tried to not like something. I really tried to find something wrong with it, but you had a great product. You had a great product, and it led to us kind of following up and talking with you and having you here today. So do me a favor. Tell us a little bit about, because what I find interesting is it's not like you were studying in school to one day run a meat company, right? Yeah, that was not the path here. So tell us a little bit about how this all started, what you were doing beforehand. Like what's the origin story for Good Ranchers?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you like the meat. First and foremost, that always helps us get a lot further down the road. So, I was kind of a preacher's kid. My grandfather was a pastor. Lots of ministry in my family, and I grew up playing music and singing, and just in my early 20s, just started working for the church that I was attending because I've volunteered heavily and stuff like that. And so my plan was just to do ministry because that's what I knew, and I absolutely loved it. I play piano, play guitar, and I love worshiping. I love leading people in worshiping. I love all of the things. I love helping people. All the things that go with it. But in one day in 2017, I had took a brief sabbatical from ministry in 2014, and I worked for a meat company a friend of a friend owned, and I worked for a meat company doing like outside sales, and I did it for maybe 6 months, five or 6 months, and I absolutely hated it. Like, I loathed it. I was like, God, like, get me out of this. Like, put me back on a stage, put me back behind a guitar. Like that is not for me. Yeah. And so went back into ministry and working, doing the thing that I knew to do. And I don't know how periodically, but periodically I would have the thought of, man, you know what? There's aspects about that business that if somebody would do this, they could probably do this. Or if somebody could take that idea and do it with integrity, do it with honesty, do it, and it could probably be it could actually be a really good company.
Because I think what people don't understand is that when they're buying their meat from the store, or wherever they get it, they don't understand where their meat is coming from. They really don't understand a lot about how it's been raised. And look, some people don't care. That's fine. Do what you want. But there is some confusion when you see the product of the United States. That doesn't mean that cow was raised and was out on a pasture and then had some corn and then that's not necessarily what happened. So tell us a little bit about some of what are probably the misconceptions within like the meat industry in the United States.
Yeah. So working for that company for that brief time, I realized two things. One, even people who manly men like yourself, no offense, not that that's offensive, but manly men who cook all the time, grill all the time, still most of them, 99% of them, and if you're listening to this, you're welcome to get offended, really don't know anything about meat. Yeah. Even you grill all the time because all you know is like what you go to the grocery store.
I know that's hamburger. I know that's a ribeye. That's it.
That's right. And I would actually question. I bet I could put a bone-in strip and a bone-in ribeye in front of you and say, look at these ribeyes. And most guys are going to go, oh yeah, that's some good-looking ribeyes. Yeah. Or even just like, again, people just don't really. I realized they don't really know what they're looking at, what makes it good, how to tell anything. So, but they'll believe whatever you tell them. Those are the two things that I learned working for that company. And so, so my thought was, man, if somebody would do that with integrity, if someone would like source well and provide a great product, I think somebody could build a meat company. But that someone was never me. It was just, I was back working I was working full time at a church and just periodically over probably about a year and a half, every once in a while I would just have that thought. And sometimes I would talk to my wife about it, like, man, somebody should do this. And if they could do this, this, and this. But again, I was not going to be an entrepreneur. My path was set. But one morning I heard God's voice say, I was in the bathroom getting ready, and I was thinking about it again, and I heard God say, "You do it." It was clear, like it was like a Damascus Road moment. It was clear, you do it. And I came out of the bathroom and I said, to my wife, I think God just told me to start a meat company. Thinking she's going to look at me kind of like you just looked at me. And
she's going to do the sensible thing and talk you out of this.
Yeah. Thought there would be some conversation, something. And I'll never forget this moment because she looked right back at me. She said, if you heard God, then I trust you and I believe in you.
So here's my question. How long have you been married at this point?
Not very long. 3 years.
3 years. Yeah. Okay. Any kids yet?
We had our first kid. Yeah.
Okay. Cause you have 4 total.
Yeah.
Okay.
We had just had our first son.
Okay. So,
well, and she at least knew enough to know that he can distinguish when he's hearing God's voice.
No. And I mean, let's explain this here, right? Because it is so easy to look at something after it's been successful and think, oh, well, this was inevitable. Yeah. But at this point, right? Like it's not as if you had already been an entrepreneur and you decided to get into a new industry. You'd never been an entrepreneur. You'd done work in ministry. You'd done work as a worship pastor.
Yeah, that's it.
That's what you knew. That's what you were comfortable with. That's where you were going. Your only experience was 6 months working in this industry for someone else.
Yeah.
And you hated it.
Yep.
Right. And you hated it. And now you're telling
when you tell it like this, it sounds really bad.
I'm just saying, now you're telling your wife that you've been married for 3, you just had your first kid. Yep. So now we're talking about, I remember when we first got married, 19 and 20, right? We didn't have any money, but who cares? It's just us. We can figure it out, right? Living on love. The moment you have a kid, it's like, oh crap. There's another whole human being here. Yeah, so I want people to understand that you coming out and saying, hey, hon, and her saying, if that's what you heard, I trust you and let's do it. That's pretty cool.
It's amazing. And and to give honor to my wife, like the women who are listening today, the most powerful thing you can do for your husband is to believe in them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't let him be an idiot, but but when my wife looked at me and said, I believe in you, and if you heard God, I trust you.
Yeah.
Like, I knew she meant it, and and so I didn't have this I didn't have this fear of failure, because I knew that and failure there's a lot of definitions of of that, right? To me, failing is only when you quit. Mm-hmm. Even if you quote unquote fail, if you learn from it and you keep you keep going. So, but it wasn't that I was so confident that we were going to be successful, but I was confident that even if I failed, she would still love me because she believed in me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's what I.
That's critical.
Yeah,
it becomes, as a husband, I would say that when your wife does believe in something that you're doing, you almost feel invincible. Mm-hmm. When she doesn't, I don't care how qualified you are. I don't care how confident you might have been 5 seconds, but the moment she says, I don't think we should do this, that is a kick to the gut like nobody's business.
Yep.
So, but all right, so you tell her this, and then of course, 2 weeks later, you're an amazing success, and everything worked out.
Gosh, no. So we start the process and the things, and the church I was working for, I went and talked to the pastor and told him, hey, I'm doing this, and he of course tried to talk me out of it, and he's like, you're not hearing God. You're meant to do this. This is what you're supposed to do. Oh yeah, and I'm like, man, and so like, no, this is what I believe I'm supposed to do for my family, and so we did. We started, and I was that guy also that knew nothing about meat, by the way. So if I offended anyone earlier, and a lot of ranch people that we talked to, even today, about 7 or 8 months ago, I was in a conversation with some people and some guys, and I said how before we started, I didn't know anything about meat, and this one guy looked over at me and he said, boy, you still don't know nothing about meat. I'm like, okay. I know a little. Yeah. I've learned a little. But I didn't know anything, but I knew I heard God's voice, and so began to pray and ask God, how are we going to get favor? What are we going to do? And so all I knew was to get a truck and put some meat in it. And so when we started, it was me in a parking lot at a mall in Waco, Texas.
Is this a thing in Texas?
Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say, like, when you say that, I'm like, but I can't imagine going to a mall in Virginia and being like, oh, meat.
Selling meat out of the back of a truck.
Yeah.
It's
they sell some stuff out of the back of trucks here. It's just not usually meat.
This is true. So, and it's becoming, and honestly, we actually made it a pretty big thing. There's a lot of people who do it now, but I didn't invent that. I saw other people doing it, and that's what I did for that 6 months. And so, but I thought, I saw an opportunity to start there, but to grow to something better. And so
this is 2018.
2018, we started, and I have 6 brothers, and so as I started bringing them in and said, hey, teaching them what I was doing, and then I would go find another location, and by 2020 we had 20 trucks. And, and in those 2.5 years.
So by 2020,
honestly, when God tells you to go, again, we had to put in the work, but God really went before us every step of the way, and not that it was easy, but it wasn't hard. So. By 2020, we would have anywhere from 15 to 20 locations open at a time. We were traveling around the country, and the plan was to get online. Yeah. And then COVID happens. Yeah. And the world goes crazy.
Well, the online stuff picks up big time, right?
Yeah. But before that, you guys had you told us a little bit about this. You guys had a moment which was kind of it had the potential to be a breakout moment for you guys, but it was also the potential to break you guys.
Oh yeah.
Tell us a little about Houston.
Oh yeah. Well, so getting started. So
Yeah.
Like you said, we heard God's voice, and 2 weeks later we were ultra successful. That was not the case.
Yeah.
The first sale we did was a parking lot in Waco, Texas, and it was me under a tent, and my wife was running our social media back home, holding the baby, and we saw some good success there. I called one of my brothers, two of my brothers from Louisiana, and they came and they took over that location. I came back home to Houston. I thought, okay, what's going to be our next location? Where are we going to go from here? And again, I felt God kind of nudged me to go to the mall right by where we live in Houston, and I went and talked to them, to the guy over the specialty leasing there. And he happened to be like the regional person of all the malls in the Houston area of this particular property of mall. So they had 5 different locations. And I have no business acumen at that point. I did not do the math on the amount of resources and money it would take in product to be able to facilitate, and advertising and trucks and all those things. But he was like, hey, you should, he's like, I could get you at these 5 malls around Houston. And I said, yeah, let's do that. And so,
oh wait, that's going to require some infrastructure.
That's going to require some infrastructure. And so, we pulled together, like we maxed out every credit card, borrowed money from my mother-in-law, and it maxed out my brother's credit cards, and then had meat on consignment, and just all in about a little over $200,000, just like between just all credit lines, and my bank account was empty. The 2 days before the sales were supposed to open up, and like advertising's paid, trucks, meats, all showing up. Everything is done, and my wife and I are driving around with our at the time, I guess, 6-month-old little boy in the back of the car, and we're going to Kinko's, picking up menus and flyers and the different things that we need, and we stop at a gas station just to get some water, some chips, and stuff. And I don't have a credit card that'll work to buy water for my family, and that's when the gravity of like, oh crap, what are you doing? Really hit of, man. But we knew that was a Wednesday, that was a Tuesday, and we knew Thursday we're opening. And once we start selling this, all of our money was in meat and all this, and it was like, we're going to be okay. That night I get home, and the health inspector calls, the health inspector for Houston. And we'd already had everything laid out and stuff. And I know better than, no business acumen, but I know better than to not
just randomly
get a health permit. And he calls and he says, Mr. Spell, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but we're going to have to deny your health permit.
Oh no.
And I said, well, I mean, the feeling of just dropped of, you can't do this. We've already paid for radio. We've already paid for meat. We've already paid for these mall locations and signs and everything. And he says, I hear you. I'm really sorry, but the city of Houston does not allow, what you're doing is peddling, and the city of Houston doesn't allow peddling. And he's like, I'm sorry that you got this far. I know who you talked to, and they told you could do this, but you just can't set up and sell meat out of a truck in the city of Houston. And I was like, but we just did this in Waco. And he's like, well, that's Waco. This is Houston. We don't allow it. And if we let you do it, then we'll have to let everyone do it. And he's like, I'm sorry. And hangs up the phone. So, I go to my wife and, hey, remember when you said you believed in me?
Oh man. What was her reaction?
She was pretty quick to say, well, did you tell them about the food drives? And I said, no, I didn't. And before we ever sold a piece of meat, even in Waco, I knew I heard God's voice say, start a meat company. And then I was praying one morning, God, how are we going to get favor with cities, with malls? Like how are we going to have, because somebody has to, the malls have to let you, you have to, have an agreement. And so how are we going to get favor with people, with cities, with malls? Like, because no one knows who we are. We have no track record of doing this. Like, and God placed in my heart. He said, give. And I thought, okay. And I said, well, if we're going to go into these cities and we're going to sell meat, let's make each location a food drive. So let's partner with the local food bank in those cities. We got big 50-gallon drums, and we'll put a barrel. We'll tell people to bring non-perishable food items, and then when we're done, we'll give a percentage of our proceeds directly into that community for those food banks. And so in Waco, we did that. We collected, hundreds of boxes of food, not non-perishable items, and then we gave. I don't remember. It was probably like $5,000, which is a sizable. Their food banks aren't just getting a lot of checks for.
So you guys had already been doing this as kind of like part of the plan that God laid on your guys' heart on the way that you were going to conduct business and kind of be different.
That's right.
And so why is that important to the health department in Houston?
So when I tell my wife that the health department says, hey, we can't do this, and she said, well, did you tell them about the food bank? And I said, no, I didn't tell them about the food bank because they said they don't allow peddling, and what we're doing is peddling. I don't know why that would matter. She's like, well, call them back and tell them that we're partnered with the Houston Food Bank. And so I called them back and said, well, hey, we're partnered with the Houston Food Bank, and each of our locations is a food drive, and we're doing this. And he said, oh, well, in that case, and obviously like this, then I was like, oh my gosh, thank you, Jesus. And then 2 days later, we opened up in those locations on a Thursday, and by Saturday midday, every truck was sold out.
Wow.
And that's really what launched.
Yeah.
If it wouldn't have been for that, we would have never, because we did have some misses after that, but that launched us to have enough, because we're self-funded.
Sure.
And again, all we had was a bunch of credit card debt to start. So
yeah.
And y'all had spent money on radio, on ads, on meat, just everything preparing for the sale.
No, yeah. We had about $35,000 in just in advertising for that span of.
Well, there's two things about this that just blow my mind. I mean, one, that's incredible. I imagine I would have got off that phone and my wife would have known something was wrong when the phone got launched across the room and I started screaming about the government. But but one of the things that does amaze me about that is that a government bureaucracy can allow you to get that far down the path with no real concern about what it actually means for your business if they got it wrong. And it's like, well, they're not liable for anything. They're just, oh yeah, we're sorry this happened. Oh, okay, well, great. Well, your empathy and $300,000 will recover that. But unfortunately, your empathy by itself gets nothing. But then the fact that in that moment, your wife remembered, like, well, did you tell him about this? What did you mention that? And that was the linchpin to you guys literally being, hey, not only are we bankrupt, but so are some of, hey, bro, thanks for the credit card. Load of the
that's
credit
exactly
card.
Right. Yeah,
it went from that to we now have kind of the capital needed to really kind of take it to the next level.
Could you imagine not being able to pay your mother-in-law back?
Oh my God.
No offense.
So you guys do that. That gives you that. And then
that launched us.
COVID.
So that launched us. But again, I honestly, back then, I still thought that like ministry was I thought that God was just putting Good Ranchers, was just kind of a stepping stone to start a church or to plant a church. Cause I always thought that that's what I would do. And so I thought it was just kind of a means to an end to maybe, cause one of my issues working at the church, by the way, which is kind of why I took that sabbatical and then I wound up coming back, is because I did not like my salary coming from the church. And I have no issue, it's a full-time job. I worked at I have no problem with people getting paid to work at church. It is very much a job.
Yeah.
But for me, personal conviction, I didn't like my salary coming from the church. I wanted, and so that I'd been praying to God to give me, to open something up, to where I could use to where I just didn't have to get paid from the church. Again, for me. So that's where that kind of whole started. But so I thought Good Ranchers was just a means to an end of, I'll do this for, we'll do these pop-up shops and we'll do this kind of thing for a few years, and that'll give us enough of an income to then start a church. That's what I thought the plan was. But then getting into the industry and when we started, once we got around 7 or 8 trucks, we started having some buying power and then being able to start cutting out middlemen and going directly to processors and going directly to facilities and then going directly to ranches and we learned, oh wow, this is a racket and it's a mess.
Yeah.
And so so who Good Ranchers is today is, I mean, night and day different than when we started. Like,
sure.
I mean, honestly, we were kind of like we might as well have been like a meat fireworks stand. It's like that's it's just like
It's like the ice cream truck for grown men.
yeah, basically. But just diving in and learning and when we was sourcing and buying and stuff, and then it was around 2019, about a year and a half in, when I learned that almost everything we were buying was coming from Mexico and South America. And I'm like, whoa, wait, huh?
Yeah, it says
But this says USDA.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? And they're like, oh yeah, everything comes from, there's no country of origin labeling law.
It's all a feedlot and
beef and pork. And I'm like, wait, are you, what? And so then that started us on this, no, we don't. I was like, hey, we want to source American meat. We want to source from American farms and ranches. That are like, well, this is what everybody does. And so we started on this, we don't want to I never considered myself like a strong patriot. In this, I mean, I love America and I am a patriot, but I guess I didn't realize it until that moment. And I went, no, that's I guess I realized, like how patriotic I was. And I said, no, we should, if we're going to sell meat, we're going to source from American farms. We're going to source from American ranches. Like, don't we have it? And so then studying and learning, I realized that, in 2015, we took away the country of origin labeling law.
Yeah.
So we can import beef and pork, which side note here, China produces the most pork, in the world. And about 3 to 1 of the amount of the United States. Wow. The most popular brand of pork in the U.S. that you will see in the grocery store,
Smithfield.
there you go. You said it, not me.
Yeah.
Was bought by China in 2013.
Yeah.
By a Chinese
heard about that.
company in 2013.
Okay.
In 2015, the country of origin labeling law is taken off of pork.
Yeah.
Just let that sink in.
Well, it was interesting too, because there was all these, like Canada and Mexico were threatening the United States with tariffs if we didn't take off, like retaliatory tariffs.
That's right.
But the World Trade Organization was basically saying, yeah, we'll let you do that. And it was going to be a lot in tariffs. And so that was used as some of the justification for why we would take it off the labeling. And look, I love free trade. I think all that's great. The thing I don't like though, is I don't like what feels like mislabeling on what's going on right now. It's one thing to say, if you want to know, I'll tell you. It's another thing for me to advertise a certain way, knowing that you're going to interpret that.
I'd like to see the campaign contributions associated with those votes.
Yeah. So, and this is what we say. I try to say this every time we talk about this. I'm not saying that imported meat is bad.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, if you look up the last, I don't know, however many you want, 5, 10 outbreaks of
Mad cow,
foodborne illness,
like listeria,
E.
coli.
E. coli. There it is. Sorry, in beef. And, I mean, you can Google this for yourself, but every single one that we've had in the last go back, it's all coming from imported beef.
Yeah,
like just so. There's something for you. But I'm saying the people should know. Yeah. It should be labeled. Like I don't have a problem with like importing meat from anywhere in the world,
sure.
But it should say product of New Zealand.
Well, at the very least, don't tell me it's a product of the United States.
It shouldn't be able to say product of USA.
Yeah.
And here's the problem. Beef is selling in the store for more than it's ever sold in the history of the U.S., and American ranchers are getting less for their cattle than ever.
Yeah.
Like, they're getting...
Is this because of the processing regulations?
It's a whole conglomerate of things. The American people want to eat American meat. Yeah. And if the country of origin labeling law, which there's a lot of talk about it right now, and I think we are making some traction, because the American consumer, there was just a poll put out just a few months ago, and like almost 90% of the poll was, we believe that there should be a country of origin labeling law on meat of the U.S. people. They want to know where their meat's coming from, and so the issue is, they go to the store, you're shopping online. If you're buying in America, you just assume you're buying stuff that was raised here.
The other thing
when
too,
when you're just not.
Thomas Massey's tried to address this in Congress as well with things. The other thing that's amazing is the processing. In the U.S., because people don't realize how much control the federal government has over our food, and especially, I would say, with meats and whatnot. Like, I've tried to carry food freedom legislation in Virginia. It's a nightmare. Yeah. Like, every time I show up, and even if it's limited, like, I had a bill that said, if I want to go to your ranch, like your personal ranch, and I want to buy some meat, there's a ton of regulations, ton of rules, everything that goes along with that. Even though you're not selling it interstate, which means if it's not interstate, the federal government should have nothing to do with it.
That's right.
It's not interstate, Fed shouldn't have anything to do with it. But every time we try to pass any sort of food freedom on a state level that will make it easier for you to be able to get food from your neighbor, so it doesn't violate interstate commerce clause, the feds will still come down and say, if you pass that, we'll remove processing plants from your state. And so it's this intimidation factor that they play, because the moment you're raising beef to go outside the state, well, now interstate commerce clause does take effect. And so there's this huge problem with being able to do this. And we look at it, when you look at American farming, we're the #1 food exporter in the world. Mm-hmm. We're the most efficient agricultural production country in the world. The only one that could even be close to maybe the Netherlands, because it's the second largest food exporter. But when you look at the rules, regulations, subsidies, the government interference into agriculture is just absolutely mind-boggling. And then you look at some of the other issues that we're seeing with supply chain issues and everything else. I know, like, if you would have told me 5 years ago, hey, Nick, you're going to be really into homesteading in a couple of years, I've been like, I think that's cool, but I don't know that it's some. And now all of a sudden, I'm like, I'm growing more food than I've ever grown before. Yeah. We're raising more food than we've ever raised before. And a lot of that is because a couple of things. One, I don't ever want to be that dependent on the grocery store again. I never want the people in my family. I never want the people in my church. I never want any of them. Like, I want it to be in a position to where if something like that happens again, I can make sure that, my community, my larger community, I can help feed them. Yeah. I want to have that. I got 10 acres. That's enough to do some stuff with. Yeah. The other thing that really is, one of our children has some food allergies that really, can be problematic. And just knowing the source of how something was raised or how it was grown or what went into that, it became a lot more important to us on that level. And I think as we see more and more, just the various garbage that goes into processed foods or the way that some animals are raised, some people oppose it for ethical reasons, some people oppose it for health reasons. But I think on a large scale, more and more people have been like, look, I want to buy, beef that's local or American or whatever it is, mainly because if that industry is strong, good, it means that the overall industry isn't as dependent on foreign imports if all of a sudden something gets shut down or there becomes a problem. Yeah. So how did you guys move to, because going perishable online is not.
Yeah, it's not.
That ain't like selling.
Yeah, it's very hard. I will say this: so people have this idea that the beef industry in the United States is this big corporate industrial factory farm and thing, and there's 700,000 independent ranches in the U.S. that in the average herd size is about 50 cattle. and that makes up 20% of the world's beef.
It's our neighbor.
Yeah, right. And so, like the American ranching, the American agriculture is strong and healthy, but we have to support it.
Yeah.
Like we just have to support it. And like, again, we think like for whatever reason, American agriculture has been demonized, and it's okay. Like everywhere else in the world, like Brazil is raising cattle better than we are, or New Zealand is raising cattle better than we. Like they're not.
Yeah.
But
that's the impression that's given.
Yeah. Like the cattle that are being raised in the U.S. are creating or contributing to climate change, but the cattle in the rest of the world aren't. Like it's
it's kind of like when we drill for our own oil, we're bad, but when we buy it all from Saudi Arabia, that's cool.
It's the same thing. And so, again, there's 700,000 independent farms and ranches that are raising cattle, like you said, like your neighbor, on these small family farms, and some of them have been generations, and that's just what they do, and we need more of that. But the system right now isn't set up for them to win. Over 100,000 of those have went out of business since 2015, since the cool law. Well over, probably closer to 150,000. It's like almost 20,000 a year has been the run rate since 2015 of ranches closing their doors. And these are a lot of these are farms that have been generationally passed down. And my fear is that we're giving up control of our food. And I love what you said, you're a homesteader, but we should have that mentality as a nation. Yeah. And we're just giving up control of our food. And I believe that the country who controls the food is going to control the people. And if we don't keep control of our own resources, then we're going to have to be a slave to these other countries who can feed us. So
I think COVID really showed us supply chain issues and shipping issues. And when all of those ships were stuck in that one strait and they couldn't get through, I can't remember exactly where that was, but there's just all of these goods on their way to the U.S. but can't get through.
That was a good time for us to not be importing.
Yeah. So that's one of those things that's interesting is you guys had said, because if you guys you guys got online and started doing online sales 2019, 2020-ish?
End of 2020.
End of 2020. Okay, so we're into COVID.
We're in the pandemic.
This is okay. So it's not like you were all set up and ready to go. No. So you had to do this through the pandemic.
Yes. Yeah, and it was very, very difficult.
Because I imagine you weren't driving trucks to many malls and opening up business during that time.
Demand got really high though, because I know everybody started ordering everything online. Right. Everybody went online.
That's right.
I mean, including Walmart. They'll deliver to your door now.
Yeah, COVID normalized cooking at home.
Yeah,
and because restaurants closed, so people had to learn how to cook. I say normalized. It forced people to cook at home.
Forced people that never really did it.
And it normalized ordering groceries and ordering food. And so we really were just in just the right place at the right time, or the right space at the right time. And so we our plan was to get online eventually, but once the pandemic hit, we were like, okay, we better get online now, because it's, otherwise we're gonna get left behind. And so it's very difficult to ship perishable items well. We learned that the hard way. I'm sorry to all of you who pre-ordered.
What does that entail? How do you package it in such a way that you know for sure that the product's going to be in good condition when it gets to its? Yeah.
So the biggest thing is having distribution close enough to people. Like we were talking about Amazon or Zappos, the shoe store. When they started in the early 2000s, they had one distribution center that shipped to the whole United States, and it was just set up in the middle because they're just shipping shoes, and you can just ship those ground and it doesn't matter. But with food, it's got to get to your house in 24 to 48, depending on the weather outside, right? But we want it to get to your house within 48 hours, and so in order to do that, we have to have more facilities across the U.S., which is so that's the biggest part. And then packaging it, I mean, we insulate and we put dry ice, which keeps it cold. And
dry ice.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question. So from 2017, you felt like God was calling you to do this. 2018, you really kind of got started. By 2020, now you're doing the Good Ranchers that we kind of see today. It sounds like kind of really started like that 2020 online.
That's right.
Okay. You didn't set out to be an entrepreneur. You were not. It's not like you had a ton of background in the meat industry or anything like that. So here's my question: What do you say to entrepreneurs, or to people that are thinking about doing that? Because I see so many people now saying, hey, we got to have the parallel economy. We've got to shop your values. You got to buy American. You got to buy local, whatever it is. And like I said in the beginning here, it kind of drives me nuts. Not because I don't think that we should, obviously if I have two options and one of those options constantly insists on insulting my values and treating me like I'm a horrible human being because I don't want to, give my kids transition surgery at 13, right? And the other one is at least neutral toward me. Well, then, I would do that. What I don't like is companies that think that I can slap an American flag on whatever I'm doing, and now you're obligated to do business with me, even though I'm more expensive, I have less quality, I have bad customer service, but it doesn't matter because I'm waving the flag.
Yeah.
So what do you say to someone that, either from a customer perspective or for someone that like maybe wanting to start a business? What do you say to them about starting off? Because again, yours is not the normal story with respect to running a successful business.
We didn't set out to be a conservative Christian company. We set out to be a meat company. And I read a book, the founder of Pixar, and I can't think of the name of it, but he wrote a book and came out around 2011, 2012, Creativity Inc., I think. And he said, quality is the best business plan.
It is.
And I really took that to heart of, if we're going to start a meat company, if we're going to sell meat, and those first few years traveling around and setting up tents and being in parking lots, and I was under those tents, and my wife was with me, and when our son was with us sometimes, and she was pregnant a lot of those times. We had 4 kids in 5 years.
Well, it's good to know you like each other.
We not only did we decide, hey, we're going to start a business, we're also going to start grow our family at the same time. And but we traveled and we talked to people and we learned what they liked, what they didn't like. And but again, we never set out to be a Christian conservative company. That is just that's just an extension of just who we are. Quality is what we want it to be. We wanted to provide amazing quality meat. We believe that food is a fundamental human need, and we believe that food brings people together. If you look all through the Bible, there's feasts, right? Then the people come together. There's feasts, and Jesus' first miracle was at a wedding where they're celebrating, and even the Last Supper was at a table where they were eating, and Jesus said, "This do in remembrance of me." Well, what is the do? It's communion, and we have this idea that communion is this ritual thing of taking the bread and the juice or the wine, depending on your denomination. Depending on your denomination there. But this do in remembrance of me is when you're gathered around the table and you're eating, remember me. When you take the bread, when you take the wine, that's again, I'm saying have communion. But the this do in remembrance of me is around the table. So we believe that Ronald Reagan said in his farewell address, all great change in America starts at the dinner table. So tonight, sit down, start talking. And we have, the last 30 years, we've gotten away from the dinner table. We don't cook home. We don't cook meals at home. And even if we do, a lot of times we stand up eating. We don't put the family around the table. We have dining rooms that we use once to twice a year, Christmas and Thanksgiving and Christmas. And even culturally, we're set up to where we have an annual family gathering, and that's not how we were designed. We're designed for the family to be around a table and to have meals and food together. So I said that to say, we set out with Good Ranchers. We wanted to provide when you as a mom, when you want to go to cook, not Not that as a
I do
mom, you're
most
the
of
only
the
one
cooking,
that
so
cooks.
that was a
Okay.
good assumption.
Okay. Whew, okay. Glad I got that one right.
How dare you?
I know. Gosh, so misogynistic of me. But you generally always have sides, but it's like what's the protein?
Yep. You have to have
do we
a meat.
have do we
Yeah.
have meat? Like that's usually the problem isn't do we have potatoes or carrots or green beans or macaroni or whatever. It's the problem is
Do we have enough meat for
do
everyone?
we have enough meat?
Yeah.
What's the center of the plate? What's the protein? And so that's with Good Ranchers, that's what we wanted to solve. We said, you know what? We want to provide the center of the plate. We want to provide protein. And the reason we individually wrap everything and flash freeze it is because you can order it, you have it in your freezer, and you're ready to go.
Yeah.
And because when you buy meat at the grocery store, you have to buy it in those big cellophane
You
things.
got to seal it at home and
Yeah,
hope
and
it
which you can't
seals.
do it right, and a lot of times you buy a big family pack of something, you put it in the fridge, and then you're like, oh crap, I got to cook this before it spoils.
Yeah.
And a lot of times
You're like, ooh, it's
does
just
spoil.
a little past the date. Maybe I
Right.
can season it some extra.
So said all that to say, we set out to be able to provide center of the plate to make family meals easier for families to make and to the quality to be there. I love what you said when you were trying to find a problem with it, like Pontius Pilate over here.
Trying to find a way these guys are guilty.
Well, it's because we've gotten meat before where we were like,
Nah.
we don't like this meat.
Well,
you
here's
know?
what I like about this, and you're right. If somebody wanted to be malicious, they could try to cut this and say, "Oh, he said he's not a Christian." No, what you said was you and your wife, your family, you're Christians. You have conservative values.
Yep.
When you went to start a company,
Yep.
and you're now marketing, that you're selling meat, you wanted a quality product. And quite frankly, when I hear someone say, buy local, buy American, buy conservative, buy Christian, okay, well then what that should mean is that I'm going to get quality.
Yeah.
And I know I'm going to get quality because of those things.
Yeah, you better have the
I'm
best
not buying
product.
those things because of everything else and then hoping it's going to be quality.
Yeah.
I want those two terms to be synonymous with one another.
Yeah, I think a lot of people. It does seem that the cool thing to do now is to start a conservative brand.
Buy Freedom Water.
And again, I'm not saying that's wrong, but if you're going to start a conservative brand, start with the brand.
Yeah.
Don't start with your values, because at the end of the day, like this may be controversial as well, but Disney sure doesn't start with their values.
Yeah.
But how many people still want to take their kids to Disney? Still want to watch the
because
Disney
the
movies?
products, yeah.
Be in Disney
conservatives-
Plus.
If conservatives are serious about a parallel economy, if they're serious about shopping their values, then they have to be able to compete based off of the quality and the goods and the services they
right.
provide.
It better be good.
And if you want to look at an example of that, Chick-fil-A.
There you go.
Chick-fil-A was a great example of a company that they had values that they focused on. If we have these values, and if these values are as good for individuals as we say, if they're good for his families as we say, if they're good for his communities as we say, then they should also be good for our business.
Yep.
And that's going to be reflected in the quality of the products and the services that we produce. And what happened? As soon as that came out, and then all of a sudden somebody did an interview with the CEO and asked him about traditional marriage. And they said, well, yeah, we believe that marriage is between one man and one woman. We have a biblical worldview. And all of a sudden everybody wanted to go, oh my God, how could he possibly, what a bigoted, horrible, homophobic human being. It's like you asked a Christian company, the CEO of a Christian company, what they thought, and they reflected Christian values. Like, you're shocked on this? And the response the next day was, people just flooded Chick-fil-A's all over the country to be like, no, it's a good quality product and we're going to have it and we're going to support them and everything else.
If their product wasn't
If their
good,
product was garbage, if I could have got just as good a chicken sandwich anywhere else, then people would have gone somewhere else, because now it's like, not only are you not providing quality, but there's all this additional baggage and heat associated with doing business with you.
Yep.
But instead, it's like, no, when I show up there, the quality of the product's good. People are polite. They get my order right. And I'm not going to stop doing that because the CEO believes something. He hasn't told anybody. He hasn't told all of his employees, and if you don't believe this, we're going to fire you. He hasn't said that.
Right.
And that's what I appreciate. Like, I desperately want to see that. I want to see people say that if you believe that these values are just that, they are of value.
Yeah.
well, then I'm going to see that in the quality of what you do, not just within your personal life, your business. But I want to, we're coming up on an hour here, and I want to get to something else, because you have taken a stand, you and your wife have taken a stand on some other issues too with respect to family.
Yeah.
And so the values that you guys have as individuals is not just something you apply in the business, it's something that you apply to the family as well. And you said something, and I'm not going to, I don't want to say it because I want you to explain it. But we were talking about work-life balance.
Oh yeah.
And you had a different term that you used that I thought was interesting. Explain to us a little bit about, obviously you've been very busy for the past 5 years in the business, but that doesn't absolve you as a husband or a father from your most important job, which aside from being a follower of Christ is being a husband and a father.
Yeah.
So how do you make all that work?
Yeah. So, back to books I read that changed my life. Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Oh yeah.
And he says somewhere in there that most people start a business, and it's funny. I read this before I started Good Ranchers, and I wasn't. And while I was reading it, I'm like, this really doesn't apply to me because I'll never start a business. But
Lo and behold,
yes. But someone told me it was a good book and I should read it. So, but it really jumped out to me where he says that most people start a business, but they really. They think they're starting a business, but all they do is create a job for themselves. He's like, the only way you're actually only starting a business if you build it in a way where it can run without you.
Yeah.
Not that we don't work, but and so that just always stood out to me early on. And so I knew from the beginning, like, if this is going to be like, and again, we had a 3-month-old when we started the business, and then our first 2 boys are 15 months apart. So year 2, we had another newborn, and that, like, I've talked about feeling the weight of, okay, like that's when it really got serious for me, is the second child. Like you said earlier that the first, when you're married and whatever, and then you have your first kid, and you're like, oh, the gravity and the weight and the reality, that hit me with baby number 2. And I remember, like, holding him and rocking him as a baby, like, and just praying to God, like, oh Lord, let this, what are we doing?
Because let me get this right.
Yeah. Well, cause things were, growing and changing and stuff. And so, like, I really felt that weight there. And, so I knew if we were going to start a business that I could not be the one. I can't give it 80 hours a week and be a husband and a father.
Yeah.
And my first call, my first ministry, my first duty is to my family, not to the business, not to the church. Like, my first, like, God. Yeah. But then my family. Yeah. And so knowing that, like, I've always tried to have the work-life balance, but this is a newer concept for me, but I was introduced to this a while back, and it just really resonated with me. Someone told me, they said, as an entrepreneur, you don't practice work-life balance. You need to practice work-life integration.
Oh yeah.
And I went, oh, that makes so much more sense, because and it's true, because, like, my family does come up to the office and to be and as a part of things, and I do like they are a part of what we do. And so like, conceptually for us, like, we try to practice, we travel quite a bit, like, hence being here, but anytime my wife can go with me, when our kids can go with us, like they do, and especially as they're getting older, that's becoming easier. So for us, it's one, you have to set boundaries. There's also this concept, this is a very world view concept of if you're a business owner, you have to be available to everybody all the time, and then your family gets what's left over. That's just not right. You have to make time for your family. I can't say that I've not been guilty of it, but my wife and I, we sit down and we say, okay, this last season has been really busy, and just recently my wife and I said, okay, you know what? This time I'm off limits, and there is no such thing as an emergency that can take me away.
Yeah.
And we just have to. You have to be okay. It's the same thing Chick-fil-A did with
Sundays.
We're going to be closed on Sundays.
Yeah.
Non-negotiable. Like, and
people don't realize how much they are leaving hundreds of millions of dollars on the table per year by making that decision.
That's right.
But would they be the same company if they hadn't?
Right.
No.
You have to have a Sabbath.
Yeah.
Like it's biblical.
He made it one of the 10 rules, people.
You have to have a Sabbath. And if you think working yourself to death is going to make you more successful, it's not.
Yeah.
And so for me, making time to be with my family is a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Like that's our Chick-fil-A Sunday is like, it's not Sundays for us, but I have times that my calendar is blocked off, no meetings, no calls. And that's not the weekend. I have that because as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, it's not 9 to 5,
right,
Monday through Friday for me.
Yeah.
Like it's 24/7. So I have time that this is my family time, and people have to respect that.
Yeah.
And I have to respect it too, because it is hard sometimes when things happen. You're like, oh well,
Because there's always a good excuse.
Yeah.
There's always a good excuse why this time it's a little bit different, or this time I have to do that. And it's interesting because we've seen that within politics and running for office and things like that, where people ask the question, well, how bad do you really want this? It's like, not at the expense of my family.
That's exactly right.
Not
If
at the
you
expense
gain
of
the
my
world,
family.
if you gain the world but lose your soul,
Yeah.
like what does it profit?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, that principle can be applied.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting because we can look at that as almost a moral position to take, and I believe it is, but it's also an amazingly practical position to take. And I had to explain to somebody once, I said, if you really want the best out of me, then my family has to be strong. Mm-hmm. Because I can't give you my best if I know that I'm not fulfilling my obligations to my wife, to my children. You will not get the best out of me if the whole time I'm working on this, I'm thinking about
That's right.
how I let them down in some other area. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying there isn't sacrifice involved. Yep. I'm not saying there's sacrifice on behalf of the whole family involved. But if it's gotten to the point where you're so obsessed with this that you've forgotten them, you will not be able to you will not get the best out of what this could be if your wife is behind you, if your kids still feel like daddy's available or mom's available or whatnot. And so I always, these moral premises that Scripture lays down, that God lays down, it's amazing how it becomes easy to think I should do this for its own moral sake, which is true.
Sure.
But it's amazing how, man, when you actually apply it, the practical benefits of it are pretty incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. God knew what He was doing when He designed the family.
Yeah.
and the work week.
Yeah.
Like it's amazing. And there's so much. If we would just look at nature more, the world would be a better place.
Yeah.
And that's a tangent we don't have time to get into, but creation tells us how we should live, and especially go back to agriculture.
Yeah.
We talked about this at dinner last night, like this idea that cattle are bad, except there was millions and millions of bison in there was more bovines in North America hundreds of years ago than now, and yet climate change is an issue now.
All the cows' fault. Filthy buffalo. 300 years
ago.
Cattle
are the most biodiverse animals that they just help nature so much if we will use them correctly. And
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So you mentioned there were some books that helped you along the way. Are there any books that you would suggest to the audience as they're, maybe possibly looking down a similar path?
Yeah, the Bible.
No. Yes. That's always the right answer.
That's the kid at Sunday school, like Jesus.
Gosh.
Which is technically always true. But
my 5-year-old. So I have a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old now. The two older boys, and then a 2.5-year-old and a 1-year-old, and those are both little girls. Bear, Wilder, Scout, and Daisy. By the way,
nice.
Shout out to my family. But my 5-year-old is really into dinosaurs and stuff like that, and so he'll have like a T-Rex, and the 4-year-old, and so Bear will say, man, this T-Rex is so strong, or he's powerful, and the 4-year-old is just so quick to say, but he's not stronger than Jesus.
He's got his Jesus action figure.
Trump card.
It's his rebuttal to everything is, but he's not. But Jesus is bigger than him. Anyway, so yeah, books that have been very inspirational for me. So two of them I mentioned, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
That's a classic that I think everyone should read, whether you want to be an entrepreneur or not. Creativity Inc. It's the founder of Pixar. I can't think of his name right now, but Your Next 5 Moves by Patrick Bet-David was a really big one, especially on entrepreneurship. And he talks about the difference between intrapreneur and entrepreneur.
Yeah.
If you don't know what those are, you should read the book and figure out which one you are. Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller really helped on the building a brand and marketing and advertising side. So,
all right. Well, of course we gotta say, all right, where do people find you?
Oh yeah. GoodRanchers.com.
GoodRanchers.com. I will tell you this too. One of the things I like about this, this site too, is that if you actually go on, you got the about story. They'll tell you about the sourcing. They'll give you some insight into some of the people they work with, what they're doing, what these various terms mean. I mean, we didn't get into it this episode, but you will see a lot of things in the United States say organic.
Oh yeah.
And when it comes to like organic chicken or whatnot,
it's BS.
Most people have this view in their head that what that means is the chickens are like frolicking along a pasture. No, they're in a cage with access to the outside.
The worst is vegetarian fed.
Oh my gosh.
Chickens.
Tell me you know nothing about what chickens actually eat without telling me, when you tell me, oh, my chickens are vegetarian. I'm like, oh, so they're malnourished, right? But so all that stuff, but they go through, they explain it.
Yeah, Google organic chicken feed scam. If you want to go down a rabbit trail.
If you want to have a conversation with one of your favorite vegan friends about that, but go and look at all that. They also have recipes on here. They also have a really interesting program too with social media and stuff like that. I mean, this is you want to talk about it again, a company that has done a good job. Not only first and foremost they provide a superior product, but then they've also found way to people to be kind of involved with it, almost feel like a community around it. You guys are doing stuff that we're starting to see other companies try to do. I don't think they do it as well, but they're trying, and that's important. Yeah. So definitely try it. GoodRanchers.com. Check them out. Like I said, we've there's only I think 2 companies I've ever mentioned in any of the stuff we've done, and it's you guys and American Freedom Co. because in both situations. American Freedom Co. was one where they said, hey, we'd like to send you something. I'm like, no, I will buy something. Yeah. And if I like it, then we'll talk.
Okay.
And you guys, and like I said, I have never been more ready to find fault with a product because I'm like, okay, great. I don't want to just do this because, we're conservatives, we're Christians. Like, okay, but is it good? And I got to tell you, man, I wasn't even able to cook it on the green egg. I had to go straight to the skillet, which is also a great way to prepare a steak.
Cast iron pans got its own.
It's got its own thing, and it's good, but it can be a little bit more difficult than throwing the big green egg. And we threw it all on there, and
let me do this for your listeners. I'll have our team do a $30 code off plus free bacon. For your listeners. Yeah, we'll do a pound and a half of free bacon plus $30 off for your listeners.
Oh wow.
We'll use the code Ben is awesome. No, I'm kidding. We'll use the code Nick.
Alrighty.
Yeah,
cool.
Sounds
great.
Use the code Nick and we'll do $30 off plus pound and a half of free bacon.
Wow. How do you say no to a pound and a half of free bacon?
You can't do that.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, hey, Ben, it has been an absolute pleasure. Please give our best to your family and most of all, thank you for not only professing your values, but living them out in what you do, both with your family and with your business.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for joining us. GoodRanchers.com. Check that out with that promo code Nick. You're going to be able to get $30 off plus a pound and a half in free bacon. You're welcome, America. All right. We'll see you next episode.